May some saving sense of humor liberate us from arrogance and pompousness, and from thinking ourselves more important than we are. May we make amends if we chance to ridicule others or their views. May we be cured from making war and calling it peace, from special privilege and calling it justice, from indifference and calling it tolerance, from polluting and calling it progress. From all these may we be cured. May it be so.
Morning. Let's start over. For today's Dharma talk, I would like to talk about what are we carrying, and I want to start with a couple of questions and then a story. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you these questions, and I don't want you just to think of the first thing that comes to your head. I want you to kind of reflect on them a little bit, and maybe even reflect on them throughout our Dharma talk today. Okay. So, what are you carrying? What are you holding on to? What are you still carrying? What are you still holding on to? Um, so now I want you to kind of settle into an answer. Um, and I want you to feel the answer if there is one. There may not be a specific one. Maybe it's more a sense or a feeling. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to share with you a story. And some of you know this story very well. It's one of the great famous Buddhist stories. And it's a story about two monks, an older monk and a young monk, and they're traveling and they're walking up to a river, and they get to the side of the river, and there is a woman there, and she's very leery about crossing the river. She's worried about the currents. So she asks the two monks if they would help her across. And the oldest monk said yes. And he bent down, and the woman climbed on his shoulders, and they walked across the river to the other side, to the other shore. And the older monks bowed to her as she left, and she walked her way. And the younger monk just kind of was grimacing a little bit, and they're walking together. So the older monk and the younger monk are walking together, and it goes by for a while, but the older monk can tell that the younger monk, well, he's carrying something. He's quiet, and before they were talking, and he was jovial. He seems almost irritated. So the older monk says, "What is it? What's bothering you, friend?" And he looked at him. He goes, "I can't hold my tongue any longer. We are told not to touch women. And yet you picked up that woman and carried her across to the other shore. I cannot believe that you would violate such a teaching." And the older monk looked at the young monk and smiled and said, "I put that woman down at the shore a long time ago. It appears that you still are carrying her." Okay. So I do really appreciate that story, and have for a long time. And I want to ask you another question. Which monk are you? Are you the old monk, or are you the young monk? Um, so I'll ask you the question again, and I want you to think about it again. What have you still not put down? What have you still not let go of? Okay. Um, so, and these are just kind of rhetorical questions. What do you think is going on with the young monk? Why can't he let go of it? What is he worried about? And what is the older monk teaching the younger monk? Okay. And these answers will come out of the entirety of this Dharma talk. Okay. So now think of your own life, And as I share these thoughts and these ideas, I want you to relate them to your regular life. Okay? Many of us, like the young monk, are carrying something with us long after it is over. It is one of the heaviest burdens that we carry with us, can be the burden of the past, either for something that was done to us or something that we have done. Now, I've talked before how we are incessant time travelers, going to the past and going to the future and going in the past, and rarely spending any time in the here and now. We fix ourselves firmly in the past, or because of our dissatisfaction with the flow, the present, or our unwillingness to change in the flow of the present, we firmly place ourselves in the future, where everything is controllable and our outcomes are guaranteed and expected. It is tomorrow, when my willpower is so much greater than it is today, that I will do that thing, that great future moment. As Gyomay Kubose Sensei has taught, quote, many people get attached to the past or the future and neglect the present moment. We must live the best now with full responsibility, end quote. Now, I think that we understand this, though I think much of the time I don't think much about it. I think that's why Gyomay Kubose Sensei is teaching us this idea of living in the best now and taking full responsibility of it. We may know it, but are we acting as if though we are responsible of making that happen? In the flow of now and the past, the future already exists. The myriad causes and conditions of our lives that have brought us here to this moment with one another, all of it brought us here. When a blessing, not so much, there you go. When a blessing of our past have, what a blessing, sorry about that, what a blessing our past have been, our karma has been. In the Zen tradition, they open with this prayer, quote, the teachings are incomparably profound and exquisite. Is rarely met with even hundreds and thousands of lifetimes. We are now permitted to see it, to listen to it, to accept and hold it. May we truly understand the meaning of the Buddha's teachings, end quote. So in traditional Buddhism, and too many of us, to hear the learning of the teachings of the Buddha have been transformative in our lives. And how great it is that we found it and what has brought us here, our karma, our lives in their entirety, the painful and the joyful, the good and the bad, the laughter and the tears, the injustices and the disappointments have all brought us here and have been kind teachers on our way. Namo Amida Butsu. Sometimes it's hard to see this, and we demonstrate our ignorance of this reality when we try to go back into the past or put off what needs to be done, what needs to be tended to today, because we can always do it tomorrow. The problem is we think we have time, and we don't. So how many of us get stuck in the past? Some of us get stuck because of trauma. Others of us get stuck because of habitual ways of thinking. We have a tendency to replay disappointments, offenses, resentments, and injustice, real and imagined, over and over again. We may get stuck in our grief for our lost childhoods, our lost relationships or marriage, or the death of a loved one. One writer shared this, quote, "Some people experience an extreme type of mourning in which they have convinced themselves that moving forward is a betrayal of the person they lost and of themselves as a responsible person. That is, they think that by moving forward equals giving up on the person they lost and giving up on being able to have done it better. So they stick to the past, feel they are true to something." End quote. What is it about us human beings that we memorialize our suffering? We create monuments to it. And our stories, we would rather live in the past than the present, in the present moment, not to let go of our story. We like to live as a testament, as a monument to something or someone long gone, while life moves past us. We hold on so tight, maybe it's because, as the same writer has written, quote, "Fear of being happy is part of the process." The idea that if they felt true joy, that would prove that they have moved on, and that would prove that the loss was completed, end quote. We get stuck in our unhappiness, our suffering. It becomes part of our identity, and we avoid everything to lose that identity. And it's funny, we do this to avoid the loss of something we've already lost. That's what the Buddha means when he says our thinking is delusional. Now, how many of you would say that at times you are stuck in the past? I did and still am at times. But once upon a time, I spent night and day in one form or another of my own carnival I created out of my history. There were scary roller coasters, Thor's hammers, endless halls of mirrors, and clowns. Holy shit. Clowns everywhere. With names like King of Disappointments, the Great Jester of What Should Have Beens, and the scariest was the clown of much injustice. His laugh, how it can make bones and hearts chill. Everything I did, everything I was clouded by this, was shadowed by this. During the day, I went to work, I went to university, I hung out with friends. But once I was alone, I hurried back to my carnival, trying to figure my way out and how I would run back into it. How ironic it is that I would run back into my past, trying to figure a way to escape my past. My first wife and I, we had a good life for a while, but we were very different in our approach to life. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out my past, trying to figure out my woundedness. Linnea and I, we call that dig and burn, baby. My ex-wife tried, but it only made her life more painful. Her path was different. And at the time, I thought my way was the right way, but I was wrong. It's just a way, and there are many others. I thought if I could figure out why I was screwed up, why my parents hurt me, why my parents were so selfish, I could just figure out what I did wrong, then I could correct it. I would finally be happy, be safe, and the woundedness would never happen again. If I just had enough understanding of the past, I could have secured a painless future. But what I learned is that there is so little that you can really figure out. How can you know the motivations, thoughts, fears, and karma of another? Memory is another form of story. Memories may be true or real, but they're not facts. The past is not fixable. I can't change what I did or who I hurt or who hurt me. And there isn't really anything to figure out. The answer of why me is ultimately an unknowable question. Maybe it's the first koan we are given. In my own experience, I have spent so much time in the past that I missed so much of what was right in front of me. The flow of now carried me along regardless of my protestations. I discovered that when we get stuck in the past, we become nothing more than spectators looking backwards. Our lives are much more than that. At the heart of every living thing is an innate suchness, an inherent beingness that can only be found in the flow of now. Ultimately, everything is either wake or illusion. Now, I want to be clear, and I want to say that what I'm not saying is that you can't learn from the past. You can learn from the past. The past is an essential teacher. Okay? But when this becomes our only teacher, this is fraught with difficulties and challenges. It is easy to get lost, get stuck in all the stories, and half of them aren't even ours. We need to be fully aware of the limitations of the past. I really appreciate this from Ajahn Brahm, a Theravada Buddhist teacher and monk. And when I first read this, I was hesitant to it because it challenged my worldview. Some people think that if they contemplate the past, they can somehow learn from it and solve their problems. But when we gaze at the past, we invariably look through a distorted lens. Whatever we think it was like, in truth, it was not quite like that. This is why people argue about what happened just a few moments ago. When we see just how unreliable our memory is, we will not overvalue the past. He goes on to say, when we sit down to meditation, do not linger in the past. Do not keep carrying around coffins full of dead moments. If you do, you weigh yourself down with heavy burdens that do not really belong to you. When you let go of the past, you will be free of the present moment. To be in the present moment, end quote. I think the importance of that he's trying to make, though, is to overvalue the past, to spend all this time in the past and not be in the present. And I also love that image of us carrying around small coffins on our shoulders. It gives a whole new meaning to say, oh, I got baggage, you got baggage, I got coffins. So from the Pali Canon, in the Bhaddekarada Sutta, the Buddha taught the following, quote, what is past is left behind. The future is yet unreached. Whatever quality is present, you clearly see right here, right there. Or in other words, the past is already gone. The future is not yet here. There is only one moment for you to live, this present moment. I want you to observe your mind and observe how many times your mind travels from past to future, you can just quickly label it past, future, and it will surprise you how much time. Also, too, if you're not quite sure, then you know you time travel and you start to have certain emotions arise in you. So you start to feel really anxious. You may be time traveling into the future, the unknowable future. If you feel yourself down or depressed, it may be you're time traveling in the past in something you did or felt was done to you or wish was different. I appreciate this quote I found from an author who is unknown. Quote, "If you live in fear of the future because of what happened in your past, you'll end up losing what you have in the present." I love that. Now, there's also another form of time travel, and that's when we get stuck in nostalgia of when life was good, or when now in pandemic times, when life was normal, as we called it. And we have no vigor for the present. This happens most often when the changes that are happening are overwhelming, and our response to the present is seeking out the past because we don't like the current future. We seek out the past before the great Oz was unmasked. We see that going on in our country right now. There are so many changes, so many things are becoming. And there's some people who want to hold on to the old ways, and they're scared, and they get stuck in this nostalgia for something that ultimately never was. The past is gone like water of the river, gone to the sea. Living in the past, we are not living in the present, but we're setting up camp in a dark cemetery, talking to no one but ghosts. Living in the past is a heavy burden and can keep us stuck. Our aspirations, our deepest yearnings is to be carried by the flow of life, but we are afraid to let go. It is exhausting because we get stuck and we resist the flow. We are like one standing in the middle of the stream, walking against the current of time. No matter how hard we try, the flow of now, the flow of life is always pushing us along with it. So why resist? Let it go and let the flow carry you. The Buddha taught that all of his teachings were about freedom, liberation. Do we really want to be free as much as we say? How many times do we trade away our freedom? Again from Ajahn Brahm, quote, "It is amazing how free you can be when you don't limit yourself to the past." End quote. Our lives can only be fully lived in the flow of now because that is reality as it is, the dynamic, ever-changing, unrepeatable flow of our lives in the everyday miracle, if we can only let it be that way. I love this quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. To live in the present moment is a miracle. The miracle is not to walk on water. The miracle is to walk on the green earth in the present moment, to appreciate the peace and beauty that are available now. End quote. Life can only be in the present moment. Enlightenment can only be in the present moment. And in that same present, our past and future can be reconciled. As Gyomay Kubose Sensei has taught, the enlightenment of the present is the enlightenment of the past and the future. And to one who is grateful now, his past is also grateful. End quote. So what does that mean? As I was sharing earlier, I think it means that all I have been through, all of my abandonment, the poor choices, the disappointment, the injustices, the suffering, all have brought me here to where I am right now, have brought me to the Dharma, have brought me to the compassion of the Buddhas, and has brought me to the Sangha. Gyomay Kubose calls the eternal present. Quote, only when one discovers for himself what he is, what he really wishes to live for, does he find life significant and appreciated. Then his entire past becomes significant and grateful, and his entire future become important, bright, and meaningful. Today exists only today, and it cannot be in the past or the future. In other words, this today does not come again in the eternal future. Today is the most unique, noble, and only today in the eternal past and eternal future. End quote. Today is the most unique and noble day, right here, right now. So let us let go of the past and return fully to the present, to the flow of now. Let us unbind our hearts so that we can fly. I want to close with this poem from Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against you, your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes, to let it go, let it go. Namo Amida Butsu.